We're finally back from our week-long trip down to southwestern Utah. We had an amazing adventure. Our dogs did really well camping for the first time. We had great weather and we saw some of the most spectacular scenery while also visiting some of Utah's famous petroglyphs. I wanted to take this opportunity just to update you a little bit because it's going to take some time in order to be able to sort and edit these videos and photographs that we have. We've got over 1,000 between my wife and I, and it's going to be tough picking out the best ones to show you. So over the next couple weeks we'll be putting together a few videos and uploading them to YouTube for your enjoyment. So stay tuned for this. Anyway, we left on a Sunday and the weather was gorgeous. We had an amazing tailwind that just flew us down Highway 15. Our first stop was in Fillmore to gas up because once we got to Beaver, which was just south of Fillmore, we were going to head west on Highway 21. We wanted to explore some of the back roads getting down to our first major stop, which was called the Parawan Gap, and that's where some of Utah's most famous petroglyphs are. It's just west of Parawan, Utah, off of Highway I-15. Just as a note, if you're traveling on I-15 between St. George, say, and Salt Lake City, don't stop in Beaver. It's typically 30 to 40 cents per gallon more than anywhere else along I-15 on that stretch. So that's just a little bit of information. You might want to check like Gas Buddy or something like that to confirm during your travels on I-15 between Salt Lake City and St. George, Utah. So at Beaver, Utah, we picked up Highway 21 going west. It took us over to Minersville, and from there we caught Highway 130 going south. This is a road that would take us all the way down to West Gap Road, which comes out of Parawan, Utah. You can actually go from Parawan, Utah onto West Gap Road, and that'll take you to the Parawan Gap petroglyphs, or we came on Highway 130 and then came east towards Parawan till we found the petroglyphs. We spent the afternoon there exploring these amazing works of art that contain some of the language, you might say, of the Native Americans that lived in that area. It was a fascinating experience. They're in pristine condition. There's very little, I guess you would call it vandalism, but they were in such great shape. It was extremely windy, it was a little bit overcast, and we had hours and hours of exploration. It was so fascinating to learn the history of this area through these petroglyphs, to learn the history of the Native Americans that inhabited this great land. They were so different from other ones that we had seen before. The Parawan Gap petroglyphs is an area we had explored a few years back, but we'd only spent a very brief time there. And this time we wanted to devote enough time to really take in these amazing works of art. We spent enough time there, we felt like we were able to really immerse ourselves in some of the culture and to really absorb the beauty and significance of these petroglyphs. In our research of the area, we found that there was a lot of dispersed camping there and decided to spend the night. It was a perfect place to find some solitude and peacefulness, and there was nobody else camping in the area. There was one truck with two locals that came by, and we chatted with them about some of the history of Parawan. Our dogs were able to be off-leash there, and amazingly, they stayed pretty close to the camper. This was their first camping experience, and they did remarkably well. So we had a wonderful dinner and then watched a glorious sunset as we enjoyed the solitude and peacefulness of some of Utah's western desert by the Parawan Gap petroglyphs. It was a beautiful morning, and we found a road behind where we were camped that we wanted to explore. We wanted to go out and do a hike with our pups before we headed to Snow Canyon State Park, where we had 2 nights reservation inside the park. My wife had been able to secure the last campsite for those 2 nights. So we went on this remarkable hike. It was peaceful, it was quiet, it was sunny and warm, and it felt so good to be outside hiking in southern Utah. Some of the cacti were starting to bloom. Our dogs were off leash and they stayed close. There was no animals that we saw, so they didn't try and chase anything. So once we got back to camp, we loaded up the dogs, put everything away, and headed south so that we could end up at Snow Canyon State Park early afternoon and get a hike in. On the way down, we stopped at Enoch, where there's a dog park in that little city. One of the things that we wanted to explore on our trip was different dog parks along the way. Areas that were fenced in where our pups could run around and play and get a lot of exercise in a safe environment. So Enoch has a wonderful dog park that they're creating there. They've even got some obstacles you can play with your dogs on. There was a couple of local dogs there with their owners, and we had a ball watching our pups play with these dogs, being chased around or chasing the other dogs, until about 45 minutes later, our pups were tired. We put them in the truck and headed to Snow Canyon State Park. Now on the way down to Parawan Gap Petroglyphs, we had a very strong tailwind and it just flew us down the highway. It was almost like not having to step on the gas at all. But as we headed south to Snow Canyon State Park, we had just as strong a wind, but it was a headwind. We couldn't do over 45 or 50 miles an hour that whole day driving to the state park. It was such a contrast to the day before. We had been to Snow Canyon a few years ago, and we found that there was a lot of changes since then, especially with the pandemic and more people being out camping and hiking, riding bikes, and the advent of the e-bike has really changed that park. One of the things that we found though is that a lot of people who ride bikes aren't really aware of what could happen when you pass a dog, or in our instance as well, horses. They're unpredictable. You can do all the training you want, but horses will always have that wild side to them. Especially when a mountain biker or an e-bike is coming behind you, we don't hear them when we're hiking or when we're riding our horses. And very few people who ride bikes, unfortunately, don't call out letting us know, or any other horseman or dog owner, that they're behind us and coming up on us. Oftentimes, they're just starting to whiz by us on the side. And especially with horses, we do a lot of training to condition them to bikes. But if you don't know they're coming and they're all of a sudden there, a horse and even dogs can spook and it could be disastrous. So please, if you ride bikes and there's horses or dogs around, just be aware, call out to the owner, let them know you're there. We always like to move off the trail to allow the bikes to go through. Even though horses have the right of way, it's still easier for us to get off and stop our horses and face the bike rider, then have the bike stop. But slow down, let us know you're there. Thanks. So we went for a couple of great hikes while we were there. The weather was incredible. It was sunny and warm. The nights were cool. The cacti were blooming. There were other plants blooming. We wanted to go back and explore an area called Joshua Tree Landscape. And it's an area that's on the Arizona border west of St. George that has a tremendous amount of Joshua trees. So we left St. George heading northwest over Old Highway 91, which was the old highway before I-15 was built. We ended up finding a wonderful campsite for 2 nights, and behind us was this gap in the mountain. Looked like a slot canyon or a big gap, and there was a few old trails going up towards it that we wanted to explore the next day, hiking with our dogs. So we got up the next morning and we packed up our backpacks, food, water, things for the dogs, our camera gear, my wife's art gear, and we headed up this gap, and it was just astounding. It was so cool to explore this area. The cacti were in bloom, other plants were in bloom. It was a clear, sunny, gorgeous day. We had so much fun. And the neat thing was, as we hiked with our dogs, they were off leash, and they did really well by staying close. They had a good recall, even though we hadn't trained them as such. They just seemed to do it naturally. So we spent the morning hiking, photographing, and enjoying this wonderful, wonderful area with our pups. So we basically had 3 days and 2 nights there. We had a wonderful time, and then we decided that we were going to head back up through St. George get restocked, and figure out where we're going to spend our last night. So we ended up going up near Bryce Canyon National Park. We knew of a small campground there that had 4 sites, and we hoped it was open. So this is an equestrian campground. There's only 4 campsites there. There was 1 person in one of them, and we in another one, and that's all we saw. So we got our camp set up, we had dinner, and then took our dogs for a walk and watched a beautiful sunset. Next morning we got up, went over to Ruby's Inn at Bryce Canyon, grabbed a coffee, filled up with gas, and started to head home. So we finally got home, and I just wanted to update you about our trip a little bit, give you a little preview of what we're going to be uploading here in the next few weeks. We've got over 1,000 files of photographs and videos to sort through, and how best to show you and portray our trip to you through this visual. So we're going to take our time. I know that we want to do the Petroglyphs as one and Snow Canyon as one because they're so amazing. They each deserve their own video. I hope you'll enjoy them. If you're enjoying what you find on this channel, please consider subscribing, hitting the like button, and hitting that notification bell as well so you'll always be notified as we put up these new videos. Anyway, glad to have you along. I look forward to sharing all this adventure with you and many, many more. It's springtime here, and we're rearranging our property to move our garden into a larger area and give our horses more obstacles as we play with them in our arena. We'll be doing some videos on that as well, so stick around, and until next time, take care, be safe. We'll see you on the next one.